Mixed Sports Media guest line, and we're bringing in the great Chris Perkins. Chris Perkins, look at the background. Look, he's on the beach. He's doing
chilling,
it
baby,
big.
chilling. That's it.
That's what you do. That's what you do, Chris.
That's always my mentor right there, baby. Chilling
Yes,
at the
sir.
beach.
Good morning, Chris.
What's up? What's up?
How you
man.
feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling optimistic about the Dolphins, believe it or not.
Okay.
Are you really?
Well,
After everything I've written. Yeah.
You're finna give us plenty of reasons. You're gonna tell us why, right?
I'm about to break it down.
Yeah,
All
Chris
right,
wrote, as you know, everybody's a great Chris Perkins from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Wrote a great article. I'll admit it, Chris, I didn't get into it yet, but I'm curious to know, why are you so optimistic about the Miami Dolphins? You must be the only guy in town.
Well, here's the thing. Now, you know, I've broken this team down 7 different ways. But look, here's the deal. They have too much talent to be a bad team. That's the bottom line here. They really do. Look, I know Tua is out, and I know Raheem Mostert is out. But look, you still have Tyreek. You still have Jalen Waddle. You got Jonnu. Teron Armstead is coming back this week, we think. I know Jalen Phillips is out, but you still got Jalen Ramsey. You got Zach Sealer. You got Javon Holland. You still got a lot of talent on this team. Mike McDaniel has not used it correctly on the offensive side of the ball, but I do think that that's going to be corrected. Snoop Huntley has another week with the team. New England is terrible, right? I mean, Tennessee was terrible, but New England is also terrible. I see these guys rallying themselves and saying, you know, screw what Mike McDaniel has planned here. This is our team. We're taking over. We're going to let our talent shine. We're not losing in New England.
What did you see in the locker room after Monday night when you went in the locker room? You went in there. I mean, that was a terrible performance. Everybody was down on this team. What did you see?
Look, that was a terrible performance, like you say. They were ashamed of themselves. But I'll say this, man. I respect this team for its mental toughness. This team has been through a lot when you consider a lot of these guys were here in 2021 when they started off 1-7 and then finished 9-8 and barely missed the playoffs. A lot of these guys were here in 2022 when they started off 8-3 and go on that 5-game losing streak and barely make the playoffs at 9-8. A lot of the guys were here last year when you start off 9-3 and you get all those defensive injuries and you barely make the playoff. Well, you didn't barely make it. You finished 11-6, but you didn't get your home playoff game.
Right.
These dudes are tested. And then look at what they've been through just this year. Tyreek's knucklehead gets detained before the game against Tennessee. Tua gets concussed. Now you don't have a backup quarterback. You go up to Seattle and get waxed with a bad performance by Skylar Thompson. You come back here, you get waxed with a bad performance by Snoop Huntley. But their mental is still together. I did talk to players in the locker room. They're still behind Mike McDaniel. They haven't quit on him. They haven't quit on each other. But, man, they got to win Sunday. They got to win Sunday. You go to 1-4, it's tough to bounce back from that.
It really is. Jenny?
So how bad do you think we're going to miss Jalen Phillips?
Bad. And look, because, obviously Chubb is already out with the knee injury. And so now you don't have either one of them. Emmanuel Ogbah has been decent, but he's not getting you sack numbers. Same thing with Chop Robinson isn't getting you sack numbers. Now the other rookie, Mo Kamara, the 5th round pick. And, Chop is your 1st round pick. And we saw this in college where he didn't have those big sack numbers, but they always said, well, he's got a high win rate. He's getting to the quarterback, but it's just maybe a step late or a half step too late, but he's beating his blocks. The same thing is happening here. That young fellow, we need some sacks now. Jalen Phillips is out. Bradley Chubb is out. You're the 1st round pick. You got to step up. So they're going to miss Jalen Phillips bad. And let me say this also, off the field, they're going to miss Jalen Phillips because y'all know Jalen Phillips. I mean, he was their Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee. He's on the board for the Dolphins Cancer Challenge cycle thing. I mean, this is a complete man, and he was a leader on and off that field. So they're going to miss his voice and his leadership in the locker room too.
I mean, I heard. Go ahead, Jenny.
I'm sorry. I just really hate it because it seems like he can't stay healthy. We know the caliber of player that he is, but this is what the second year we're going to miss him for the whole season.
It is. And you know what, Jenny, here's the other thing, this is not part of the, Chris Greer, the general manager, kind of has this thing of, I'm not afraid to take players with an injury history. Jalen Phillips kind of doesn't fit that. Bradley Chubb did fit it. Tua fit it. Teron Armstead fit that mold. And I don't like that. I don't like that they go after players with an injury history. OBJ fit that mold, right? And we're seeing the results in a lot of these players. Jalen Phillips didn't fit that mold, really. We know he had the concussion problem at UCLA and he retired briefly. But, he comes back and he has, 3 productive seasons until last year. So, yeah, you feel bad for Jalen Phillips. This isn't one of those marks against Chris Greer. And y'all know I got lots of marks against Chris Greer. This isn't one of them, though.
You know what, though? I've been hearing his name around town. Chris Greer, even Coach McDaniel, and the name Tyreek Hill associated with trade rumors. Even Tyreek heard about it.
Yeah.
How much of this is just smoke and no fire, or is it the other way?
That's Tyreek. But, look, now y'all know Tyreek. First of all, if y'all go to Tyreek's Twitter bio, his page, what does it say? It says, I like to start blank and leave the room. And then yesterday, he's a troll. And then yesterday, after all this stuff happened, what did he post? Like, I love trolling nutcases. And so you can't take this stuff seriously with Tyreek. Now, what you can take seriously is the knucklehead behavior from Tyreek and the drop passes. And look, all of this mess has got to stop. Like, look, I like Tyreek. I have no problem with Tyreek, but Tyreek is a knucklehead. And he what the mess with the social media influencer. He's running through football plays with her in his backyard. Tyreek is married, and his mom and one of his kids is looking on. Like, what kind of mess is this? Like, you're a married man, and you're back here in the backyard, and your mom is watching. Like, come on, Reed, you got to be better than that. Come on now. And the incident at the marina where he supposedly smacked the boat captain in the back of the head, and like, you can't have all this knuckleheaded behavior. You're a team leader. You can't be getting detained by police before a game. And now you got your boy Calais Campbell, maybe the nicest man in NFL history, standing there in handcuffs, having to explain to his family why he's in handcuffs, because he's never had problems with the law. But it's being with Reek. They got to get Tyreek under control.
When is it? Yeah.
Squeeze in. Maybe we need a little Pat Riley treatment. Shut up and play.
Look, if we Riles would blow this place apart. Like, they couldn't play for Pat Riley. They could not. These dudes could not play for Pat Riley because he's too demanding. I mean, you know what? And see, here's one of my problems with Mike McDaniel is he believes in this player empowerment stuff, which I believe in too greatly. But the problem is, I'm more old school, like Brian Flores, Jimmy Johnson, Pat Riley. Like, I'm coming in here cracking some skulls because we're getting the best out of this team. It's not personal; it's all business. And Mike McDaniel's big thing is, I want my team to work hard, but I'm going to turn my back and do this, and I'm going to trust that they work hard. I'm watching you because my job is on the line.
Accountability.
Right.
Because Tyreek and Waddle did not play the last game. I mean, dropping balls. Yep. And I'm like, go show me. You remember how to play football.
Right.
Show me you remember how to play football. Yeah, you got a different quarterback. Yeah, Tua had your number. And, he just was dishing it out to you just like, like pancakes.
Right.
But have Huntley's back. And what's on Huntley? What are your thoughts on Huntley? I know it's only, a couple of games. He's been here a couple of weeks. Tell me what you see in Huntley.
I think Snoop has potential. The big thing for any quarterback coming into this system, and I've talked to Skylar Thompson about this. I've talked to Mike White, last year's quarterback. I've talked to Tim Boyle this year's. This is an intricate system that Mike McDaniel does not do simple. You know, you see all this pre-snap motion, all this mess, and the quarterbacks tell me in the huddle, these are long plays, lots of words you have to recite to these players. Sometimes the play is late getting into the huddle because they don't have that part of the operation smoothed out. And that's a coaching thing right there. But, you know, I see potential with Snoop Huntley. He's a guy who, you know, we think of him as a running quarterback, but he's a guy, if you look at the analytics and the statistics, he gets that ball out of his hand pretty quickly, just like Tua did. And I think that's one of the reasons that they wanted him, is because he does closely resemble that skill set that Tua has in getting the ball out quickly, but now you have the added dimension of the legs. So it's just unfair to Snoop that he's only been here 2 weeks and now they're throwing him in. If he was here the whole training camp, Snoop could be a really good, productive backup for this team, and he could give them a new dimension. But the knuckleheads bring him in 2 weeks before, and it's like, didn't y'all know that Skyler and Mike White were inadequate? You had the whole offseason to look at them. You have this big training camp battle, and now the first time something comes up, they're not ready. That's bad decision making by the executives and bad coaching. Why is this man not ready to play? Like, you had him for months. Get him ready to play.
Well, you sound like the people in the chat. You sound like the folks in the clubs at the games that I've been to, as a matter of fact. We're talking with the great Chris Perkins from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Has been covering the Miami Dolphins a long time. And if anybody knows what's going on with the Dolphins, Perk knows, as a matter of fact. So we've been asking the people in the chat to throw some questions at us, Perk, because we're confused as to what's going on with this team. DJ Chuck wants to know if you think that Tua needs to retire.
No, I think Tua can do whatever Tua wants to do. It's his life. You know, what I think a lot of people don't understand is, to these guys, this game is your whole identity. This is all you've done your whole life. You never worked at Wendy's. You never did anything like that. You've been a football player, and a damn good football player, to get to this level. And now you're making generational money. You're succeeding. You're having fun. You're living the dream. It's hard to just walk away. So you know, what I think is that Tua has to do whatever is going to make Tua happy. Now, you do have to take your family into account first, but do what makes you happy. I think Tua is going to return. I do think that Tua will be concussed again, and that will probably knock him out. But come back, 100% come back, and you know, live your life.
Wow. You know, I've got scary concerns about that as well. I mean, I've seen this guy go to it over and over and over again. That's the last thing I think anybody wants to see. Are we being selfish, though? Like, I mean, I know it's his decision. But are we being selfish as fans in wanting him to come back?
No, I don't think so. I think, look, common sense tells you, after you've seen this man laid out twice, once having to go off on a stretcher, this is not good for his health, right? But that's Tua's decision to me. That's his decision to make. And look, let's face it, all of these football players are risking CTE, right? By all these repeated blows to the head, all these repeated collisions. We see all the evidence that comes out when they study the brains of these dead players. Your percentage of getting CTE is raised very, very high by playing football, but more power to you. That if that's the chance you want to take, go ahead, play football, live your best life. It's up to you. I'm not here to tell you what to do.
It's a game of risk and, you know, risk versus reward.
Right. It's a violent sport. You know that going in.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, I look around the league, man, and people are crapping on the Dolphins, saying this might be the worst team in the NFL. I mean, they're saying all kinds of stuff. A year ago, I thought this was the greatest offense that I've ever seen since the Greatest Show on Turf. What happened?
Man, look, here's the thing. You know what? I started writing this, Jeff, back in December of 2022, and people were, screw you, Perk. You're a crazy Perk. This offense was just based on getting the ball to Tyreek. That's it. That's it. And I kept saying that this offense is about two things: Tyreek Hill and the threat of Tyreek Hill. And if neither of those are present, nobody's going to beat you. I respect Jalen Waddle. He's not going to beat you. I respect Raheem Mostert. He's not going to beat you. Hell, Tua's not going to beat you. They need Tyreek. It's all based on Tyreek. I will give you some numbers here. The Dolphins have lost 7 of their last 10 games. They've lost 6 of their last 7 games. The only game that they won in that stretch was this Jacksonville game, and Tyreek had 130 yards receiving. Those other 6, he was under 100 yards receiving. Like last year, they were 8-0 when Tyreek had 100 yards receiving, 2-7 when he didn't. Like this whole thing has been based on Tyreek. And and other teams have figured out, if we don't let them get the ball to Tyreek, they can't score. Last 7 games, they're averaging 12 points per game. And this goes back to the game where Tyreek got hurt against Tennessee last year, where he got that horse collar hip drop tackle, and he was never the same afterward. The Dolphins' offense has never been the same afterward. You can draw direct lines between this. If they can't get the ball to Tyreek, they're not going to win.
If this team does not make the playoffs, what does Stephen Ross do with Chris Greer?
Man, well, here's the big thing. You know, I wrote the column last year that if Mike McDaniel doesn't win this Kansas City Chiefs playoff game, he should be on the hot seat in the offseason and this season. That was another Perk. You're crazy. Are you crazy? All right. All right. But here we are. You know, here we are. And I had also said I wouldn't extend anybody's contract, because if this thing goes sideways and you have to fire Chris Greer, which if they don't make the playoffs, that's the stage you're at. You don't want to try to hire a new GM and say, look, you got to take Mike McDaniel and you got to take Tua. And we know Tua could go out at any time, and we know you might not like Mike McDaniel's offense. I would take a broom to the whole thing, because quite honestly, if you fire Greer, the new GM wants his own head coach, and the new head coach wants his own quarterback. And so that's why I wouldn't have extended anybody. And for the fact extending Tua, look, you didn't know about Tua's durability and health, right? I mean, this is a man who 4 of the previous 5 seasons, he's had injuries, whether it's been a hip, a concussion, a finger, a rib, right? I mean, it's been one thing after another. Why are you extending this man's contract? But here we are. But yeah, if they don't make the playoffs, you really do have to look at firing Chris Greer. And let me say this also. This whole team is Mike McDaniel's creation, okay? Like I've said, Chris Greer is like Instacart for Mike McDaniel. He makes the grocery list, and Chris Greer goes out and does the shopping. Chris Greer is at Publix, you know, stuff. Yeah, and so my big problem with Chris Greer is he doesn't have a vision for how this team should be. So if you think when Adam Gase was the head coach, this was Adam Gase's team. When Flo was here, and you know, and they wanted to play Josh Rosen, and Flo was like, "Screw that! He's going to lose, and I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to do that." And you can't let the head coach do that. And this is Mike McDaniel's vision. Like, you know, Ozzie Newsome, right? When he was in Baltimore, you knew you were going to be a physical team. You were going to run the ball and play defense, no matter who was the head coach. These are the staples. Same with Howie Roseman out in Philly, right? That there's certain things that this team is going to be able to do. And that's why you can make a Super Bowl with Nick Foles and with Jalen Hurts, is because your system is in place. Same thing out in San Francisco, right? You made a Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick, Jimmy G, and Brock Purdy, and that's because your system is in place with the GM. Doesn't matter who the head coach is. You've got a system. Yeah. That's one area where Chris Greer has been a major failure. He doesn't have a system that you're recruiting to. He's always sticking his finger in the wind and seeing which way the head coach wants to go. Put your stamp on the organization.
Well, would it be fair to say that some of this is also on McDaniels and asking for inquiry minds that want to know, why were we in a rush to redo his contract? Yeah,
well, you know, McDaniel, I think that's on Steve Ross. Look, I think Mike McDaniel shares the majority. He's responsible for the majority of the blame in this situation, even more so than Chris Greer. But extending Mike McDaniel's contract, that was a Steve Ross thing, and that was a bad decision. Hey, look, the way Tua tells it is Mike McDaniel was very instrumental in Tua getting that contract extension. And I believe that 100%. If y'all remember, Tua was doing that hold-in thing during training camp for his contract, to get a new contract. So he wasn't doing all the team drills. He was just doing some individual drills. One day, Tua's out there, and he has an incredible practice. Mike McDaniel runs inside. He tells Steve Ross, we've got to sign this dude to a long-term contract. And that's what happened. And during the press conference, we know this because Tua, we were talking about how this happened. And Tua said, well, some little birds in the building told me that Mike McDaniel was very instrumental in it. And I asked McDaniel about it. He didn't answer. Well, a lot of people were, no, that was on you. And so he's responsible for that. So get the contract extension to Mike McDaniel is on Steve Ross. The contract extension to Tua is on Mike McDaniel, and that's the bigger flaw. To me, it's a bigger mistake to give the extension to Tua than it is to give it to McDaniel.
I remember the day after when he came to practice and had the little gun and everything, was shooting it and doing the whole money sign thing and everything. Everybody was happy, and Dolphin Nation right now, they feel like they've been hoodwinked. They feel like they've had they're doing the old banana in the tailpipe thing.
That's right.
Like the rug has been pulled from up under them. Like when you have a juggernaut offense, you score 70 points in a game, something that hasn't been done in decades, and then you have to go through this. I feel horrible for Dolphin fans. I really do. And is there anything that you see that they can hang on to that can give them room for some of this optimism that you obviously have a lot of?
Yeah, well, you know what? Let me say this. I'll say a few things here. I think the perfect metaphor or symbol of the Mike McDaniel era is the back-to-back performance where you smash Denver 70-20, and then you go up to Buffalo and get smoked 48-20. And it's kind of like, here's that's a perfect example of what I've said about this team is that they run up numbers on bad teams, mostly at home, and then they go on the road and get smoked by a good team. Wow. You're scoring 20 points at Buffalo. Like, what happened to this great offense? Right. Last year, you scored 14 against Kansas City in Germany. Like, where's your offense? 17 in Philly? Like, show up, offense. Show up. You scored 19 in Baltimore? That's unacceptable. Like, you're running up numbers on bad teams, and good teams smoke you. And that's been the story under Mike McDaniel, and that's what that 2-week turnaround shows. Yeah, you smacked Denver, but then you went up to Buffalo and got smacked. And that's what this team is about. And so that's why I was always trying to temper everybody's excitement of let's really look at what's going on here. And this is what's been going on. So, you got to kind of temper your excitement based on that. But at the same time, I picked the Dolphins to finish 10-7 this year. But I also said I'm not sure that they have what it takes to win a playoff game. What I've kind of revised it down to, I expect that this team is still going to be within a game of 500 going into December. They'll be in the playoff picture. What happens in December, I don't know. Because here's another thing about Mike McDaniel teams. They don't show up in December and January. They're 4-10 in December and January under Mike McDaniel. That's not the sign of a good team. They're like 7-13 on the road under Mike McDaniel. Not a sign of a good team. Again, they beat up on bad teams and get smoked by good teams. And so I do think that because there's a stretch of bad teams coming up, they ought to be able to get fat and happy. And that ought to, going into December, I don't know what the exact numbers are. So maybe they're like 5-4 or 6-5. I don't know, what the number would be. Maybe they're 5-6 or something like that. But they should be within that 500 range. There's no excuse. I don't care if Tua's not there, whatever. You've got too much talent to go into December at like 3-7 or some crazy mess like that.
No doubt, no doubt. Jenny?
I'm hijacking the show today, Chris, because I hope you watch some Thursday night football. And please give me something on my Falcons, because that was a stable win last night. For real. Come on. You got me right there.
Yeah, you know what? I'm hoping that the Falcons do good. You know, we saw them here when during they had joint practices here against the Dolphins, and so they looked all right. They looked all right. You know, I like your boy Kyle Pitts there at tight end. He's got a lot to offer. So I'm hoping that they can do something, because I kind of like Atlanta. I got one of my boys, Mike Cunningham, is there. You know Mike Cunningham, Jeff. You remember from the Sun Sentinel back in the day?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, dirty. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, ATL.
I knew I liked Chris Perkins.
Yeah, whatever. Whatever. Perk, I'm letting her run the show today. I'm letting her take over, because did you see the celebration after the game? Like, they went nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, they went nuts. They were out in the streets. Like, we don't do that in Miami. We go in the streets when we win chips.
That's right.
And that's it. We celebrate big wins, but they went wild. Like I said, everywhere in the ATL last night. And I felt good for them, Good for them. Good for them. The question I want to ask you, we're going to wrap it up. Chris Perkins from the South Florida Sun Sentinel joining us here on the Jeff Fox Show live with Jenny Jones. Chris, you go up to Foxborough, which is normally a house of horrors for the Dolphins. And I know these aren't Belichick's Patriots, but something you mentioned earlier in this interview was that there's a staple of a team that good teams do, meaning they have something that they hold on to no matter who the players are. Mm-hmm. The Patriots are still very physical. They're still very defensive oriented. Mm-hmm. And that kind of scares me when you think of the Dolphins going up there, because I haven't seen that in the Miami Dolphins this year. They're not very physical. What gives?
No, they're not. They're not. They get smacked around by physical teams. They're very finesse. Borderline soft mentally. I shouldn't say they're just not physical. I shouldn't say that they're not soft mentally. They're just not physical and aggressive. And one thing about this team, though, they do have a good fighting spirit. They don't give up. And so I do give them points for that. And look, they should get OBJ back this week. So, you do get right. And so you do get that presence. And so, look, I know Snoop hasn't been with them long. I know OBJ won't have been out there long. But, Jeff, you can't tell me that you go up to Foxborough with Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, and OBJ, and you're coming home with a loss. You can't tell me that. Like, you better come home with a victory, or else don't come home, right? I'm sorry. This is
don't let them in the club. None of that.
Right. None of that. Yeah.
None of that. So, man, that's
right there. I like that mentality. Win or don't come home.
Win or don't come home.
It's a new rule here, Jenny. Win or don't come home now.
Exactly.
It's a Football Friday on the Jeff Fox Show. Chris Perkins, everybody. Thank you, Perk. Great insight. Somebody in the chat, Frank O'Neill, says this guy knows his 1, 2, 3.
And 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Hey, Perk is the man. So we appreciate you, Perk.
Hey, dog, let's do it again. Anytime.
Let's do it again, man. We appreciate you. Thank you, Perk.
Okay.
The great Chris Perkins, everybody, joining us here on the Jeff Fox Show.